I'm feeling a bit under pressure for this one because I'm sat with an actual celeb of journalism, is what I'm going to call you. So I feel like you should be interviewing me, but I'm interviewing you today.
We could do that.
So how are you, Nick?
Good, Callie.
Good.
Lovely to see you.
Yeah, and you. We sort of see each other little and often.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
But it's always a pleasure. We've got things coming up this year. I think over winter, everyone goes quiet, don't they?
Yeah, well, I've been especially quiet.
Busy working away.
Just at that stage where, as a writer, you can talk about being a writer a lot, but some stage you've got to write.
You have got, yeah, you actually have to do it.
That's the tough
And
bit.
that's some time thing, but we'll come into that.
Yeah.
The first question I'm going to ask you is, how did you end up in this crazy world, which is the cigar world? Because you don't have a store, you're not a retailer,
No.
you are essentially a consumer, but with lots of bells and whistles.
Yeah, exactly that. I was a very, very enthusiastic consumer. And I was a newspaper journalist and a reporter, and I did a bit of corporate stuff, and I got to the stage in my life in my early 30s, I suppose it was, and I was sort of reached that stage where you think, actually, this is not fulfilling me very much, and what am I going to do with my life? And sort of, existential crisis of, I thought I'd enjoy this, but it's led me down a path which I'm not enjoying. And I thought, what can I do? I want to spend more time doing things that I actually like.
Yeah.
If you're going to do a job that you get something out of, right? And so I started to try and write about more things that I enjoyed. So it would be, I'd write about cooking or something, and I'd write a piece for one of the magazines about outdoor barbecues or something like that. I love my food, and then maybe it would be countryside stuff. I'm a country boy. I like fishing. I like shooting.
Nice.
And I always found it easier to write, and I think my writing was better when I had a passion for what I was writing about.
Yeah.
And I think that's true of anything you do, really. If you don't like it, it's hard work, isn't it? And if you do like it, it seems easy. And I always, since I was little, had this fascination with cigars, which is weird, because nobody in my life really did. As a kid, my granddad smoked a pipe, but that was it. No one in my family was a cigar smoker or a smoker at all. But I always it got me, and I don't know what it was, but I just was fascinated with it. Even to the extent that, long before New World cigars were a thing, I was reaching out to makers in America and trying their stuff and talking to them and listening to all the podcasts in the US, and and I knew of these guys long before they became a thing over here, because I could see the way it was going to go. If it happens in America, inevitably it happens here. It might take some time, but it happens, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to be a rocket scientist. And I could just tell that at some stage that wave was going to come to us, and at that time we were massively Cuban. Cigars equals Cuba as far as the UK were concerned, pretty much. So that was really it, and I started to make friends with these people, and I enjoyed it so much, and going to events, and I love sitting down and having a cigar and chatting to people, as you know.
Yeah.
I'm at my happiest.
It's a very social thing.
It is, and I'm at my happiest when I'm with cigar people. Yeah. I just think it's a lovely industry. People genuinely, like 99.9% of people, are great, and they're having a good time, which helps. And it's endlessly fascinating. So that's what I did. I started to write about cigars, and of course there's not many writers that do write about cigars. There's lots of bloggers and things that do a great job. But I always thought it was odd that in wine, a wine writer was quite a revered person. They wrote books, people in the street would know of them, and if they recommended wines, they'd sell out of supermarkets.
Yeah, there's a lot like spirit, journalism. Yeah,
absolutely, it's a known thing, but that didn't exist in cigars, and I thought that's not right, and I wanted to see if we could change that. So that was part of it, really. A, I loved doing it, and I just wanted to do things I enjoyed, and B, I thought it was massively underrepresented as a serious art form.
Yeah.
It was always treated as a bit of a joke or mentioned in passing.
Do you think some of that is, I'm just going off a bit, like the whole digital side of things, like less people are reading? I know obviously like books and things go digital now, like with audiobooks and you can, download books to your phone and stuff, but do you think that was the crossover? Like a weird...
I don't know. I mean, even when everybody was reading, there still wasn't that
reading,
much.
reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Proper reading.
When actually physically
Yeah.
reading, yeah.
You know, there's not old books that are about cigar culture. You know, there are books with cigars in them.
Yeah, but isn't that crazy? Because you can name the books that have cigars in them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can count them on one hand.
Yeah, you're right.
And I find that weird, and I think it's such a shame, because there's this massive untapped well of romance and culture and travel and family and all the great things that we love in life that we seem to have ignored. And I thought, well, I can do that.
Yeah.
So I started reaching out, and I met Scott many years ago, and I said to him, I can remember right when we first talked on the phone, I said, I believe in New World Cigars. I know it's going to come. I want to help you. And that was music to his ears.
Yeah.
Because he was banging his head against a brick wall then. And we met on the service station halfway up the M1. And that's how a great friendship was formed.
That's romantic.
Yes, exactly. It was lovely. And we've become really good friends. And we've been travelled a lot together. And we've laughed a lot together. And smoked a lot of great cigars. And a lot of the cigar makers that we now talk about are friends of mine, which I find amazing and so humbling, and I love to go out and see them and their families, and I get to know them and they become close friends, and I enjoy that aspect of finding out not just what a cigar looks like or doing a review and telling everybody what you think you can taste. You know, at the end of the day, a cigar is what you taste. You know, nobody can tell you what you taste. They can tell you what they taste, but you know, don't get hooked up on all the flavours and stuff. Do you enjoy it? Do you not enjoy it? Is it sweet? Is it strong?
Yeah.
That's, you know.
Yeah.
What I enjoy is the people behind it, and the artistry that goes into it, and then you meet the farmers that grow it, and that's a whole different encyclopedia of knowledge. So it's a journey really, and I think it just brings me so much joy. I can't overestimate to you how much joy cigars bring me. You know,
you've essentially got, not to where you are, it's not like a platform, but via friendships then essentially.
Totally.
Just through meeting people.
And I wanted it to be like that, you know. I've tried to do things in business and elbow my way up, and that's just not me.
No.
You know, I think you have to realise sometimes in life, like you said earlier, is be you.
Yeah.
And I spent too much of my time trying to be somebody else, which I think a lot of people understandably do.
A lot of people
when you're young, you look up, I want to be like him or her, and actually, you need to find your own way.
Yeah.
And my way was to be inquisitive, you know, to be curious, to have an open mind, to be friendly, and to, you know, just to talk to anyone who'd listen with no agenda. And I think that's important. People, when they talk to me, know that I am not there to stitch them up, or I don't have a strong opinion either way. I'm willing to listen to them, and that goes a long way.
It does go a long way, yeah.
But it's taken me many, many years to get that trust in the industry, because even the retailers, they'll say hello to you at a show, and you can see them out the corner of their eye. You know, what's this guy's game?
What do they want?
What's his grift?
Yeah.
Where does he want? What does he want from me?
Yeah.
And I honestly, genuinely don't feel that way.
No.
I don't approach it like that,
No.
and I don't think people at first understand that, or they don't trust that. But then after a while, I work with them, I do stuff with them, and they realise, if Nick says he'll do it, he'll do it. And what I say, he faithfully represents. And then you slowly get a buy-in.
Yeah.
And now I'm in the lovely position that I can pick up the phone and call anybody, pretty much, in the industry, and they all talk to me and welcome me and with open arms. And that is just an absolute joy for me, you know?
Yeah. So, you mentioned writing.
Yes.
You've got one fully published book, which we obviously promote and sell, which does so well.
Yep.
You're now on to your second book.
Yes, so I've reached the stage now where I write less for magazines and things, although I do still do it. I spend more time writing books. I write my own books, and I write books for other people. And that's become a really nice sideline, because you get the chance to then, like I just mentioned, really understand a person, a family, an ethos, a business, and you get the time to invest in that. And then my skill, if I have one, I think is to bring you with me as a reader.
Yeah.
So if I'm talking about being somewhere in the world and smoking a cigar with somebody, you know, people tell me that they feel like they're there.
Yeah.
And I think that's just lovely. You know, that's something I'm good at. and for people to be able to shut the world out for a little while, just like when they smoke a cigar.
Yeah.
Open the book, sit down, and for a while you're lost in that moment is very, very special.
It's the same thing, isn't it? Like you said, you're reading that book, you forget about everything else.
Yeah.
So the same as when people sit with a cigar and they put their phone down and they're just chilling. You're in that moment rather than all the hustle and bustle of life.
And I think that's the biggest compliment you could pay me.
Yeah.
Because that's the joy I take from cigars, is while I'm doing this, I'm not worrying about the mortgage or taking the kids to school or has the dog been to the vet or whatever else
it might be. Things,
everything we all fret about, that all goes. And that sort of space of peace is a wonderful place to be. You know, it's why we do things like fly fish or yoga. I do yoga as well for that reason, because it takes me out of my own head.
So all winter you said you were writing your second book.
So the first book was Around the World in 80 Cigars, The Travels of an Epicure. You've read it?
I've read it, yeah. I enjoyed it because it's also, it's not a comedy, but it is funny.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm just chatting with you. And obviously we've sat and had loads of conversations. It is like what you said, when I read it, it just feels like we're having a conversation, even though I'm not participating. So yeah.
And that's lovely. People say I laugh and I smile when I read it because I think of you. I can hear your voice.
Yeah, because I know who's written it.
Exactly. It's just like being with me, and we laugh about stupid things.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a lovely thing. If that's how people think of me, remember me, and look forward to what I write, I mean, what a great thing.
Yeah.
It's so nice. And I wanted my life to be a very positive, you know, at the end of the day, you make a choice. How do you want to be in life? Do you want to be a positive person? Do you want to try and be the best person you can be, a role model for your kids? Do you want to try and be the best dad, the best husband? Do you just want to be a good person and help people? And that's always been very important to me, which is why I support charities with the book as well. Nobody does that.
No.
You know, people don't write books and give their profits to charity. I don't know why. I believe that in life you have to give back if you want to receive.
Yeah.
And it makes me feel good, and it gives me a chance to go and see people less fortunate than myself.
Yeah.
Very humbling, and to be able to help them in a small way is just a massive thing, you know. You know, we're on this planet for a short time. If you can help somebody, you should do it. I think. So that again has been a whole different world that's opened up to me. You know, and everyone's so busy about making their money and understandably running their shops, getting some profit. You don't often hear much about people putting back, you know.
No.
One thing Lawrence does a lot of, which is why we get on so well, I think, you know, he does think about other people. So that's another angle. So the first book came out 2019, just before the dreaded COVID.
And that was out in 2019.
Yeah, out
so
in
people
September 2019.
During COVID, they could read the book.
It was lucky it did come out then, because it probably wouldn't have come out for years after. And it was a culmination of many years of work in and out of cigars. And as you say, it's got cigars in it, but it's not completely about cigars. You don't have to like cigars even to enjoy it. Many people have told me that they've really loved it and not bothered about cigars.
Yeah, because it's not heavy on like the
detail.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
And that was one thing I wanted to differentiate, is there are lots of really good heavy duty cigar books about history, brands. The cigar was this size and it came out in this year, and it was I think if I, you know, knew back when we were kids about neurodivergence and things, you would have said I'm on some sort of spectrum, because the detail doesn't go in or doesn't stay in, and it turns me right off. So if you meet someone who's a real techie guy, and I try my best to be interested,
but it's too heavy,
but it just doesn't work for me. That's not the way I work. And so, but if you start talking about people and places, and then I get infused. So I wanted to do the very opposite, because the other thing people said to me was, well, why do a book? You know, there's loads of good cigar books. Why not? Why do another one? You're just going to do the same that everyone's done.
The cigar books that we have are informational, aren't they?
And they do tend to be very similar. You know, there's good ones, there's not so good ones, and they all do it slightly differently, but effectively it's the same information repackaged. So I thought, well, if I'm going to do that, do a book, it's got to be something that's completely different. And I think that's the great USP of the Around the World books, is that there's nothing else like them.
No, agreed.
So the first one we plugged it, and I've sold it and hooked it and done an audio book, and then I launched a podcast of the same name to try and keep the whole thing going. And we've sold over 5,000 copies now, thanks to Tor and their distribution, and to the likes of Lawrence, who sold about 1,500 of those, I think. And as we talked about earlier, the Instagrams, we did 2 a week for years during lockdown, and the YouTube videos, and they're always mentioned in that, and we meet these characters, and then after a while I think, okay, maybe I'll read this book. Yeah. And it still sells to this day, and that's the great... Hey, I've done a Cali.
You've done a
I've done a Cali.
You've done a me.
In honour of you. Look at that on my cream trousers.
I telepathically done it.
And so it still sells. The great thing about books is that there's no shelf life, as it were. Yeah. You know, a good book now is a good book in 10 years. Yeah. So I thought, well, look, if people like it, they said to me that one problem with it was too short. Okay. And when's the next one? Yeah. So then you have a problem. It's like the tricky second album.
Yeah, it's got to be as good.
If you're a musician, you know. Yeah. You spend your whole life putting together the first album of all your hopes, fears, angst and thoughts, and then suddenly it's a hit and they go, right, let's have another. Oh God, yeah. So you have to go again. So that was a good challenge, and during lockdown and after lockdown we did the pods and everything and kept ourselves busy, and then when I could travel again, off we go again and start doing new stories and coming up with crazy new places to go. And what I didn't want to do was, again, the same things that everyone else has done, interview with so-and-so and you see the same answer to the same question, which I know that you deplore as well. You know, everyone effectively asks the same questions.
Yeah, of course they do.
So what can we do that's different? And the brands that have come on board, you know, have said, we'd love to be in your book, Nick, how can we help? And we cook up these crazy, crazy ideas. I've got my Boveda socks on today.
Look at that. Yeah, I did see them earlier,
branded,
actually. Yeah,
and that's because I went to Minnesota to meet the boys and girls from Boveda.
I hear that was experience. Didn't you go camping or something?
We went winter camping.
And nearly died.
Well,
I do remember...
There is a story. You'll have to read the book, but it is true to say that I ended up in ER.
Good.
So,
well, it's memorable, and it made good.
You know,
reading
even when
content.
I was in that situation, which wasn't very funny.
No.
Part of my brain was going, "This is gold dust.
This is brilliant for the book. It's for the plot.
Absolute gold
It's for the plot."
So we do suffer for our art. So there's lots of silly things like that, but hopefully through it all is that overriding sense of passion and joy and adventure and friendship, you know, that I think is all part of Cigars, really.
Yeah, and something you mentioned earlier, I'm going off course now, is you mentioned like a lot of vloggers or books and stuff give you tasting notes of what you should or shouldn't and things like that. And it's funny, I've got a story the other day. I smoked it was about a month ago now, I smoked the Cinco de Cinco for the first time, the Hoya. Yeah. Brilliant cigar.
Is it?
Absolute brilliant cigar.
Great.
But it's the first cigar, and obviously I've been doing reviews and I've been doing events and things like that. Yeah. It's the first cigar where I sat there and I've always gone on about how I can just taste tobacco, and you get various tastes of that. Yeah. But I've never been able to be like, oh, you know, you get the tasting notes that you receive from different people that say leather and things like that, and I'm sure some people can taste that. It's the first cigar that I picked up and I smoked, and I got halfway through it, and I looked at my friend who was smoking at the time, and I was like, I can taste marzipan.
There you go.
And it was so weird, that moment. I'll never forget
your brain
it.
got it
because
straight
my
away.
brain is now picking up, obviously because I smoke a lot more. Yeah. I'm picking up different notes. I guess the tobacco becomes more normal, that my palate is searching for other things. So I tasted marzipan or almond. Yeah. It was so like
obvious.
Yeah. Yeah. I was really thrown.
It's funny how that happens, isn't it? Yeah. And I think as long as you don't strive for it and contrive it, and like think, I'm doing a review, I must think it tastes like crackers. And the problem with reviews is there's nowhere to go, because if you spend, you know, some of the review sites or whatever, every time they're review heavy, how many times can you say something?
Coffee, leather.
And then they strive for something else and something more obscure, and in the end it sounds like a caricature. Yeah. Whereas I think if you genuinely accept, you taste what you taste, it's strong, it's sweet, it's light, it's mild, and then every now and then something does pop up in your brain, and I think also experiences.
I was about to say that, so obviously you've been travelling for your, well, obviously you enjoy travelling, but that's for your book as well and things like that. there'll be moments, I presume, where you sit down and you have a cigar that you may have smoked here 100 times in this lounge.
Absolutely.
But you're smoking it in Nicaragua with the cigar maker, sun's out, all of the whole, whatever's going on in the experience and things like that completely changes how you.
And I think that's why people chime with it, because people who aren't nutters like us, who devote their life to cigars, might like a cigar, but to them it's about the experience. It's that night. Do you remember when me and you had that cigar up? They don't really care what cigar it was.
No.
It's about what they were doing, who they were with, what a great night we had. And do you remember we talked about this, and that cigar was fantastic. And honestly, I've smoked some of the most ordinary cigars in the most amazing places and loved them.
Yeah, it makes it a whole. But then you document it, which is nice. Because, like, we get to relive them experiences with you.
Yeah, and the one thing about that weird brain of mine is that what it does do is remember those things in great clarity. So the things that I really dig, it records and really observes, you know, and I am an observer. You know, I find I see things that people don't see because I'm looking in a different way, or looking when they're not looking. And so I used to remember little places in the world and people and times and experiences. That's how I sort of, my world is. And so I thought, that's really good, because I can just instantly go back to that, and I can talk to you about how it felt with a breeze on my skin and what I was looking at. And
do you think that's come through your journalistic life though, like that you almost know when you're wired like that anyway, but when you go away and you're doing these experiences and you know you're going to write about them, you're picking up on everything, because you know you're then going to put it into paper and someone's then going to read that you want them to feel the exact moment, rather than just like, oh, I was sat with Nick having a cigar.
I think so. It's become very deliberate, and I had a very formal training, so I learned law, shorthand, local politics, and all the stuff you had to learn as a trainee journalist back then. And that was a really good grounding, because it made my brain work in a way that it didn't really want to, but I had to do that stuff to get to my next level. So I had a very formal training so that I could write objectively and concisely and accurately report what was said. But what I found in hindsight that I did during the time when I was trying to find things more and more that I wanted to do is create this world, if you like, that I could then, it could be my world. So that I could talk about those things we've just mentioned in a way that no one else can. So in that way I thought, what can I do? Because everybody's doing stuff, what have I got that other people don't have? And that is that ability, basically. So I consciously started to, instead of being just another reporter who would write an article about something, tell you the information and you flip the page, what I wanted to get to was a situation where you look back to see who wrote that article, because you thought, I enjoyed that, who is this guy, I really enjoy it, and then you look for it, and then when you recognise it you think that's Nick Hammond. No one else can do that. And I think that's the beauty of where we've got to now, is that I have this unique place that is my place. And it's wonderful because it's like a sort of computer simulation, because I have created that world. You know, I wanted it to be this genuinely honest, decent, honourable place where good people could meet and enjoy each other's company and enjoy amazing things, and not bang on about all the bad things in the world. I spent years doing court reports and police and murders, and you know, all of which was fascinating, but I got so jaded with that. And you know, if you switch on the news today, you want to jump out the window. And I just decided that I'm not going to, you know, you can't ignore what's going on in the world, but you can choose what you allow into your life. And I made a conscious effort to allow good stuff in, and to, you know, not fixate on the bad stuff. So I wanted to create that world where this existed. where, you know, and the cigar world, as we've said, is a lovely place. People are very friendly, even competitors are friends. When we all get together, we have great fun. And it's some of the most joyous times of the year is when we have a big get together and you meet people you haven't seen for ages from all over the world, share a cigar and a drink and a hug and a joke. And that, to me, is what I wanted. That's where I wanted to be. I used to follow the American cigar industry, as I said, and watch the awards and read the interviews, and they were all rock stars. You know, they still are, these people. You know, your Jonathan Drews, your Pete Johnsons, your George Padrons. You know, they're rock stars of the cigar world, and I desperately, jealously wanted to be part of that. And I now feel that in a small way I am, which is a great thing, and that's really what I wanted my life to be about.
So going back to what you just said about competitors and things coming together, you've been lucky enough to go on the tour, I'm sure you have. And I was speaking to someone last week actually who has been on one, and he said the same thing. He said he met people in the same world that they know of that perhaps work for a different retailer and things like that, and obviously there is an element of competition, there always will be.
There has to be.
But he said, you know, when they were away and they were in Nicaragua and they were experiencing the factories and the stories and things like that, everyone come together in a way that he said he's made great friends now with competitors as such. They're always going to compete because they work for different retailers, but they've come together over the same subject. And I think that's really important. And you
will know in your time in the business that also you end up swapping jobs.
People, I think once you're in the cigar world, you stay within
Next thing you know, your competitor A is now your colleague B. And you swap about and you begin to see the big picture, and then the sharp edges come off and you go, okay, it's not just a job and it's not just a dog-eat-dog world, it is actually. And I think that's why it's become so attractive to young people. Because it's a very different way of working than anything else that's out there.
Well, I came out of the industry and then came back in because...
I remember you first time round.
Well, I came out thinking the grass was greener, a complete different angle. It was actually satellite technology.
That's right.
Selling satellite phones, which you may be aware of on your travels. I don't know if you've ever been anywhere so remote that you don't have mobile phone data. So
they're not even expensive now, are they?
No. So that was what I went into. But I then had all this cigar knowledge and I remember the industry and stuff, and I just wanted to get back into it.
Did you quickly realise that it wasn't?
Yeah, I did. One, it was way harder than enjoying what we do and the networking and the social and the friends and that. It was sales, and it was just sales. Obviously I made friends there, but a completely different angle. But I remember sitting there in COVID because I was made redundant due to COVID, and I remember sitting there thinking, I have all this cigar knowledge and I miss it. And I think like now you're in it and you aspire to be a cigar rock star and you are well within the industry now. Everyone knows your name, even though you don't have a retail store, you write books and you're a journalist, that you don't want to leave that now.
No.
It's kind of like you're in it and that's it.
Well, that's right, and you've invested so much in it. And you think, oh no, if I get out now, what was all that for?
What would I do?
So it's an evolution and it keeps growing, and I like to think, the second book's coming out, travels around the world in 80 cigars there and back again. It's now in production, the writing's finished at long last.
Oh, you've finished the writing, that's good.
And it will be out in the next few months with a fair wind, and then it will be pushing that, and that will lead to new things. And I'd like to think if there's an appetite for it, then we go again and we do book 3, and why not? Are you trying to plan them always over winter, where you write over winter? It does seem to be that way.
Well, that's a good way to do, because obviously we have events now coming up for the rest of the year, cigar events and stuff.
It's just that wasn't a deliberate decision, but it seems to have happened that way.
I think it's a good plan.
I find myself in my little office in my garden, which is freezing cold.
Okay, not so good plan.
And it's only a little shed, really. We've got a glorified shed. I've got a radiator put in.
Okay, good.
And I'm sitting there looking out at the rain thinking, right, listen, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. And so that happens for days, weeks and months, and then at some stage, by some magic,
you do it.
It does come.
So when are we expecting the books to reach our shelves?
I would like to think it'd be out this summer.
Okay.
Yeah. And we'll start pushing it. It'd be great if it was in time for Father's Day, but I'm just waiting to see what the design team say about that. And then we push it throughout the year and into Christmas, and we do lots of events and tastings and readings, and that will lead to interest in the book 1 again for people that don't know. And another lovely offshoot of that is that people have now come to me and said, Nick, I've always thought it'd be great to write my book. Would you be interested in writing it for me?
Yeah, that's lovely.
And that's amazing.
Yeah.
So now I've done a book for Hoya de Nicaragua, their 50th anniversary book, Cinco Décadas, which is a beautiful, beautiful book.
Is that from Juan himself?
It's the story of the brand.
Yeah.
But it's very, I mean, I went over there and spent a lot of time interviewing poets and politicians, historians, because they really wanted me to get Nicaragua and why it is where it is. So that was a really big project and a massive...
What an experience.
A massive investment in me, you know, to give me the faith to tell their story. It was very, very humbling and quite daunting.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you've got to get it right.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I think I did. And then, of course, people read that and go, who is this guy? And then they ask around. And most people, I think, say, Nick's a good guy. And that's how it works. And I love it. I really, really love getting to know people beyond the advert in a magazine.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for spending some time with me today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to talk about me instead of someone else.
Yeah, we swapped foot today.
I'm quite good at it.
Maybe I'll write a book one day. I doubt it. You can write it for me.
Done.
All right, but thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure, Kelly.